So today's that day for tricksters and tomfoolery. That day to say bazinga, and I got you. Yes, it's April Fool's Day, we all get it. But don't you worry about a thing, I'm not here to say, oops, I tricked you. Here, you are in a safe zone on this channel. Everything that we're about ready to talk about is, as far as I'm aware, is legitimate, including some more news for the PlayStation 5 Pro. We actually got some new details for that, as well as an update for this year's biggest PC and Xbox title, Palworld. For as fast as it's inflated, so too was its deflation. But is that really anything to be concerned about, or are people just blowing the story out of proportion? Well, we will talk about all of that today. Let's just go and get right into things, though, starting off with Hollow Knight Silksong. Yeah, we actually going to talk about this on April Fool's Day, and like I said at the top of the video, as far as I'm aware, everything we're about ready to talk about is indeed legitimate, but I will say, at least for the first topic, there has been some questions about whether or not this is true, and I can hardly blame people because we've been waiting for a very, very long time for any kind of Silksong news, so for it to happen on April Fool's, I get why people might be questioning things. We'll just kind of leave that as a forewarning here. But basically what's happening is that there does appear to be some movement with Hollow Knight Silksong. I mean, there for a while, this game just kind of vanished off the face of the earth until ironically today on April 1st when some Xbox Store listings was spotted. Wario64 posted this online, and at first fans just kind of shrugged it off as some kind of sick joke, or at least until Wario clarified in a second tweet, stating that Silksong's Xbox Store page was also shared by an Xbox Portfolio Senior Content Planning Manager. He then went on to say that the store listing really does appear to be brand new today. So this is either, again, some kind of sick April Fool's joke. There's some sickos out there, unfortunately, or there could actually be legitimate, and this is what I'm hoping for, there could be legitimate Silksong movement here, and they're just using April Fool's Day to kind of mask an upcoming announcement. I mean, who knows, but I do hope this happens soon. This is going to be a huge announcement when it does happen. I think this will be an amazing game over on the Steam Deck or the Nintendo Switch, and yes, it's also actually coming over to Xbox Game Pass, day number 1. You just absolutely got to love it. Now, we also got an update for Unicorn Overlord. I mean, this is probably one of the more unique games that we'll see in 2024, and that right there is exactly why I'm really happy to say that it just eclipsed 500,000 units sold. I'm always thrilled when a high-quality, unique game gets rewarded like this, and this so far has been a huge success for Vanillaware. Now, just for comparison's sake, 13 Sentinels being their last game, which was also a very good title, I do recommend that, but that game took 3 years to sell 1 million units. So to see Unicorn Overlord sell 500,000 in less than a month, yeah, it's tracking very, very well, especially over in Japan where they've had a hard time keeping it in stock. They actually had to issue an apology over this situation because they just didn't produce enough physical copies for Japan. So if anything, it definitely seems like Unicorn Overlord is exceeding their expectations. Again, though, this is a very unique title, so I think when a lot of people look at it, they might be on the fence, but the good news here is that there is a demo on the Nintendo eShop. So if you are on the fence, maybe go give it a try, but either way, big congrats to Vanillaware. They once again earned it. Okay, so let's go and talk about the PlayStation 5 Pro. I feel like there's been mixed reception for the PS5 Pro so far, and not everybody completely understands the need for its upgrade. Now, I don't think that's entirely unexpected. In reality, I think that if you already own a PlayStation 5, that line of thinking is in the realms of expectations. Current PS5 owners will be more critical about whether or not it's actually worth an upgrade. You know, it's not like these things are going to come in cheap. So all eyes right now are on the PlayStation 5 Pro and what it has to offer. Well, we actually got some new details over the weekend thanks to the ever-reliable Tom Henderson. Tom Henderson once again unveiled even more information, this time though for what qualifies as PlayStation 5 Pro enhanced games. In other words, what kind of upgrade does a game need to be able to include that PS5 Pro enhanced label on their box art. This is something that we've seen in the past for similar consoles like the PlayStation 4 Pro or the Xbox One X. So what qualifies for this label on the PlayStation 5 Pro? Well, we can see here, according to Tom Henderson, For the PlayStation 5 Pro, PlayStation wants games to offer a PS5 Pro exclusive graphics mode that will combine PSSR to upscale resolution to 4K, a constant 60 FPS, and to add or increase ray tracing effects. Now, he also went on to say that games may also be given the PS5 Pro enhanced label if they offer any of the following enhancements: increased target resolution for titles that run a fixed resolution on the standard console, increased target maximum resolution for titles that run at variable resolution on the standard console, increased target frame rate for titles that target a fixed frame rate on the standard console, and then lastly, inclusion of PS5 Pro ray tracing effects. So you see all that, and it's clear they're targeting things like higher resolution. They want a more consistent 60 frames per second, and that's definitely one of the things that stands out here, just because there's a lot of assumptions based on its CPU that we're not going to see meaningful upgrades in terms of its performance. But these are all targets they have, and I think that's the thing about the PS5 Pro for me. I feel like there's a lot of assumptions based off of its specs alone, but that doesn't really tell the entire story. See, what I've seen a lot of online is that people are looking at its specs, and a lot of people are just kind of jumping to the conclusion that because of its CPU, it just simply isn't big of enough upgrade. The CPU is mostly the same outside of a small 10% boost, and because of that, there's a lot of concern online that the frame rate just won't see a lot of improvement. And to that, all I can really say is that I think it's far too early to jump to that conclusion. I mean, what we know right now is that some of that frame rate is going to depend on if a game is CPU bound. You know, something like Dragon's Dogma 2 being one such example. That game relies on a CPU. But as for other games that don't rely as much on the CPU, well then yes, they could see frame rate improvements. And it's also important to keep in mind here that we're still missing a very important part of the puzzle, and that is PSSR. You have to remember that we still know very little about Sony's internal AI upscaling technology, and this is an important feature for the PlayStation 5 Pro. I can't say that definitively until we see it, but AI upscaling can be a game changer for things like picture clarity, and yes, at times for frame rate as well. Right now on the console side of things, PS5 and the Xbox Series X are AMD based, so they use FSR Super Resolution, which really isn't quite as good as something like NVIDIA DLSS. So the theory here is that if Sony can make a better AI upscaling technology than what they have right now, and if they can make it more comparable to DLSS, then yes, this could actually be a huge feature for the PlayStation 5 Pro, and to some extent, I think this might actually be a small glimpse as to what they're doing with the PS6 as well. I imagine they're building PSSR as an integral part of the future for PlayStation. AI upscaling is a big part of the future for gaming, and if Sony can offer a good solution here, then this is really just the first step of that technology. So it will be interesting to see what they have to offer in terms of PSSR. So that's why I feel like knowing the specs alone for the PS5 Pro just isn't quite enough. I think we still need to see it in action to see what it can truly do. Until then, it's really just hard to give a definitive opinion on what it has to offer, and I think that's one of its big problems. This leak has been troubling for Sony in the sense that they're not really ready to show it yet. And there's a lot of people just jumping to conclusions based on its specs alone. In the meantime, though, we do at least have some targets on what they want for the PS5 Pro. These are all the things that they're currently telling developers that they want for PS5 Pro enhancements. And I think that if developers can get a more consistent 60 frames per second with maybe even higher resolutions, then I think for a lot of people, this will be an upgrade worth it. But ultimately, we do need to see it in action, and that is something that I will be very curious to see and see what they say about PSSR. Now, something else that's been making waves over the last few days is Palworld and its declining player base. On one side, this is the most successful 2024 game by far, and really just one of the biggest success stories ever in the history of gaming. It reached 25 million players with an unheard of pace for a brand new IP. But here we are, months later, and reports are starting to come in that highlights its player count has dropped by 97% compared to its peak high, which, keep in mind, was 2.1 million. For those unaware, that is the second highest peak high of all time. So even though Palworld's peak high has dropped by 97%, it still has 60,000 plus players as of this very recording, which is still pretty incredible all things considered. So ultimately, this is still a very good number, but the question is this some kind of failure compared to its original peak high? And no. I'm quickly going to shoot that down. First off, all you really have to do here is look at its user reviews on Steam, and clearly, fans are very happy with Palworld. It still has a 92% approval rate, and I think that right there tells you a lot about how people feel about this game. And more so, you have to also remember that this is an early access title. It might not feel like that considering its success, but Palworld has already far exceeded any kind of expectation that it had, even while it's unfinished. And now, really, its player count will largely depend on its updates over time. In fact, Pocket Pair has already revealed a roadmap, and if they put out good updates, well then yes, fans will return over time. Now, will it reach 2.1 million again? Well, it doesn't really have to be quite honest, because they've already made a ton of money, and they could potentially still make a lot more, depending on what future updates they have. This is definitely a very unique situation. They are a small team after all, and I'm fairly certain they were not prepared to give rapid fire updates. So a player drop-off like this is pretty much expected for an early access title, especially one of this size. So I thought it was kind of amusing seeing reports on its player count. I mean, sure, it's an interesting fact, but it's definitely not something to be alarmed by. If you enjoyed Palworld, that's not going to change. And if you're hoping for more content, well, then that's still happening as well. Now, one last thing that I want to quickly talk about here is a new Xbox dynamic background. I thought this was a really cool gesture by Xbox because they actually went back and gave Blue Dragon a dynamic theme for the Xbox Series X. Now, for those unaware of its importance, Blue Dragon is an exclusive Xbox 360 title with artwork done by the legend himself, Akira Toriyama. It's really still so tough to think about, but with his passing, it's nice to see Xbox put this theme out in his remembrance of everything that he's just done for fans worldwide. Blue Dragon might not be his most well-known work, but it's still a really good JRPG for the Xbox 360, and it is something that I would actually recommend playing. You know, to this day, I think that it's aged very well, thanks to his amazing artwork and just the timelessness of the JRPG genre as a whole. And even better, you can still play this game on the Xbox Series thanks to its backwards compatibility. It is on the Xbox Store, so definitely go check out Blue Dragon if you haven't already. Once again, though, here's for Akira Toriyama. Thank you for everything. That's going to be it for this episode, though. Do let me know what you think about the PS5 Pro. And again, maybe go check out Blue Dragon if you haven't already. But until next time, peace out.